You guys are, if a lot of you guys fish some of like the Mississippi River oxbows or some type of river impoundments, or certain areas around the country that just have dirtier water, you got to figure out how to catch bass in muddy water all the time. And then more commonly, most lakes have a diversity of water clarity. They've got some stained water areas and a little bit cleaner water areas, but anytime that you have an influx of rain, you're going to have to deal with muddy water. So you've got what I consider just stable muddy water, where that's sort of like the baseline for the water clarity where you're fishing. And then you've got situational muddy water that is based upon weather patterns that have put a lot of sediment and dirty water into the lake. So we're going to talk a little bit about both of those, how to catch fish in both of those. Okay, now there's a big difference between muddy water in a place that stays muddy and a place that has gotten fresh muddy water in. So let's talk a little bit about both of those. If you're fishing a body of water that has known to have dirty water in it all the time, those fish get acclimated to that, and they're comfortable with that. Most of the time, you're going to find that bass fisheries that have, dirty water in it all the time are not the best fisheries. It's like dirty water, bass can live in them and they can survive in dirty water, but they can't really thrive in there. So I've never really fished a muddy water lake that I consider being just a great fishery. But nevertheless, you still have to just fish with what you have. So first thing to remember, if you have that condition, those fish are always going to be shallow. But bass that live in muddy water lakes are going to not suspend as much. They're not going to use much water over about 5 or 6 foot deep. They're going to live shallow around whatever shallow targets that you have. And the thing that's a little bit different in a lake that has muddy water in it is bass get conditioned to that muddy water, and they don't require the same type of techniques that are required in fresh muddy water that we'll talk about here in a second. But in general, I have found when I'm fishing a traditional muddy water lake that the sky conditions are really it really determines the techniques and baits that I use. If you're fishing a lake, say for example, that has got 12 inches of visibility in it most of the time, and you have a sunny day, even though that water is dirty, you can still catch them on baits that are not considered traditional dirty water baits. I remember one of the best tournaments I had one year. I was fishing the James River, and the water I was fishing where the James was, it was about 10 or 12 inches of visibility, and there was a lot of really shallow cover, like shallow wood and shallow cypress trees. And I was catching them on a 4-inch black plastic worm, a 4-inch Zoom finesse worm in that muddy water. That bait didn't displace water. It didn't put out vibration.